Hi, we are going to dive into special occasion speeches, which is the last type of speech you will be giving this semester, and this is the last video of mine you will have to listen to. Yay! We are going to be looking at one type of speech specifically for the special occasion speeches. Over the course of the semester, we have looked at several different types of speeches: the informative speech, the demonstration speech, you did a persuasive speech, and now you are moving on to the special occasion speech, which I'm hoping that you have a little bit of fun with this unit. The special occasion speech is going to challenge you a little bit more creativity-wise than any of the other speeches have done. They are also probably the most common speech based on the book and based on what I'll talk about today that you will end up giving in life. The book talks about how introductions and farewells can be part of a special occasion speech, how introducing a person, like a new coworker, could be considered a specific type of special occasion speech. So these are the speeches you're most likely to encounter. I apologize if you heard some animals in the background. My cat and dog are playing pretty aggressively with each other. But anyways, as the name suggests, a special occasion speech is a speech given to mark a special moment or event. The speech that you're going to be giving is going to be a commemorative one, so you're going to be commemorating someone or something depending on how you view it. The book discusses the different types, which could be an entertainment speech or a speech for entertainment, a speech to celebrate, a speech to commemorate, a speech to inspire, or a special occasion speech could be one that has a social agenda of some kind. So what goes into a special occasion speech? How are they different from the ones that we have already given in this class? For a special occasion speech, you are going to need to balance being prepared, which is something that we have worked on all semester, while sounding spontaneous. Because a special occasion speech, and you've probably seen them given a wedding toast, for example, you want it to feel genuine and, again, just feel more spontaneous. So how do you go about doing that? Well, you need to balance being prepared and that spontaneity. So we're going to talk through this lecture about how you can do those types of things. A way to do that would be you want to follow conventions and the traditions of a typical speech pattern, but you really want to think about two different things. So you want to think about the setting, so where you're giving the speech and why you are here, because those things are probably going to be weaved into the speech and maybe even mentioned. And then you also want to think about the purpose. So are you there to motivate? Are you there to inspire? Are you just speaking to console? Or are you there to celebrate? Then you also want to follow those conventions and traditions, and you can utilize the skills that you've learned in this class through outlining and preparing for your other speeches. But then you also really want to be focused on speaking from the heart. And that is something that is easier said than done. When you are speaking from the heart, you do want to avoid cliches because that can make you sound too prepared. And you want to make it personal. So you want to show what an occasion means to you specifically. So these types of speeches rely heavily on pathos and rely heavily on ethos, which is the speaker credibility. How much experience you have with that person, what do you know about them, sharing stories and things like that. And then this is also a perfect time to practice your vivid and interesting language, because you want to utilize those things to draw people in, to make them feel inspired or to make them feel better, or to celebrate with them. You're going to need to use language that is above and beyond what you may have prepared for a demonstration speech. This one is, again, we're going to have fun with this. You're going to get to be creative, but it's also important that you know that we're going to have to break down some of the things we've worked on throughout the semester. So we've worked all semester on building up a structure because you need to have those tools once you leave this classroom, but you also need to know that it's okay to break them down a little bit, because once you know how to work with your tools, it's fun to find, I don't want to say shortcuts, but it's fun to find ways to, you don't need to use them. You don't need to rely on them because now you know how to build something completely. So let's Oh, I think my PowerPoint cut me off a little bit. So let's talk more about your specific speech that you're going to be giving. You will be giving a eulogy for a cartoon character. And this cartoon character can be a television character, or a movie character, or a comic book, or a book character. But it needs to be some type of cartoon character. Why am I going to be doing this cartoon versus another type of eulogy? This gives you a chance to practice something difficult without having that emotional connection. Again, this speech will push you creatively. I don't want this to be a mocking eulogy. You should treat this as an actual eulogy speech, so it should be beautiful and it should still be moving. I do want to say, and I will probably say this a few times, if you have experienced a recent loss that makes this difficult for you, please do contact me privately and I can work with you to just slightly modify this speech. And again, I'm probably going to say it a few times. Please do this. Don't wait until the last minute to do this, because I don't want you actually feeling loss at this moment in time to impact your speech grade, which that's a bullet point. Some of the nuts and bolts, this speech should be 5 to 7 minutes long, just like all of the speeches have been this semester. You want to hit within that time frame. You do not need to have references for this one, and you also will not need to use a visual aid, except I am asking that you send me one photo of your character when you submit your thesis statement, which is an assignment for this week in Cobra. You will be able to use note cards as usual, and then you will still have to submit a full sentence outline for this one. Again, it will be due in Dropbox at 11 p.m. On Friday, the last, right at the, when your videos would actually be due. Remember to follow all the video and audio guidelines if you are submitting yourself, but there will be a doodle poll and there will be an opportunity to come to the presentation center and just get this one out of the way, having myself or the other instructor record for you. Okay, so I've done the nuts and bolts of this speech. There is also a Word document that outlines all of this information as well if you've already tuned out. So I want to go back to talking about the actual topic of this speech, which is giving a eulogy for a cartoon character. You are going to imagine that this person is a character that was a part of your life in some way. So you can pretend to be another character, or you could bring this character in your own life. You just have to respect the character's personality, who they are, and you want to portray them realistically. So if you decided to do a eulogy for SpongeBob SquarePants, you could either you could give the eulogy as if you were Patrick or as if you were Squidward, or you could bring SpongeBob into the real world and SpongeBob could be, one of your cousins or a friend of yours who actually lived in a live action universe that you also lived in as well. And this is where I'm asking you to be creative, because you get to make those decisions. I'm not going to make those decisions for you. You're going to be using a lot of vivid and descriptive detail for this speech, and you're going to be appealing to pathos in this one because it's going to be emotional, and not necessarily sad emotional, but you're going to be sharing memories and stories about this person, and those might be humorous, they might be sweet, they might make people happy, and things like that. So those are all important things to be thinking about as you're writing the speech and as you are as you're just putting all of your materials together. I have never given this speech, so I talked with the other instructor on and asked her for a couple of examples of what other people have done. She said that she's had students who have had which this one may be kind of challenging for some people, might be too emotionally challenging, but she has had people who have done, Hello Kitty was their mom, or they've had Scooby-Doo be their fraternity brother, or they've had Tweety Bird be their sorority sister. Somebody had the Roadrunner who was their track coach, and she even had somebody who was the backpack to Dora the Explorer, and they were giving a eulogy about Dora as the backpack. So obviously you can see there's lots of room for creativity. You can decide how the character died. It doesn't need to come up though, because that doesn't always happen in a eulogy. So it's really your story to write. It might be important for creating your backstory or sharing your stories to just have a little bit of a backstory in there. But again, not necessary. And I cannot hit this hard enough. This is your opportunity to just have fun and be creative. And I say that without trying to sound super morbid. You should really celebrate who the character is. We should celebrate who they were, what they meant to you as an individual, how they influenced you. Those are things that you would see in a typical eulogy. You can even pull stories from your own memories and substitute your character for an actual person you know. So say you want to have Wonder Woman be the character that you give a eulogy for, and there was a time that somebody you knew, maybe just a good friend of yours, had a funny moment with you. Maybe you went on an adventure with them, you went hiking with them. Instead of using your best friend, you could insert Wonder Woman in there. So think about those things in terms of creativity and those types of things you can do. Delivery is going to be really important on this one because you're going to want to stand up there and be confident. You're going to want to make a lot of eye contact, and you're really going to want to be focused on your nonverbal delivery. So be thinking about that as well. So, what should a eulogy entail? I'm not going to go through all of the things in the book. I think that you probably can get a good sense of special occasion speeches from just reading through those materials. So, I'm just going to dive into the eulogy a little bit more. So, what should a eulogy do? What should you make sure you have within your speech? You do want to make sure you acknowledge the family. This is really important. You don't have to introduce each member of the family, but you should greet them in some way when you begin your speech, and that'll be in the introduction, which you will see shortly. You could pick out some audience members if you want to address people directly in the audience, point them out. You could give them, if you're giving a speech for Scooby-Doo, you could acknowledge Shaggy and Velma and Daphne being there and thank them for being there or welcome them to the gathering. You also want to acknowledge the setting. So why are we gathered here? What is the setting? Talking about those types of things sets the scene. And then you also want to establish your credibility, which I discussed earlier. So you want to explain to us how you are connected to the character, and you really want to be using those personal examples throughout and personal anecdotes to teach us about the character and let us know, pick out a couple of their character traits and then pick out some stories that go along with those and establish who they were as a person, and then establish your relationship with them. So you're still going to have all of the components of an introduction, but things will be slightly different for this speech since it is a slightly different type of speech. You are going to still include a thesis statement, which should be a single declarative statement. And I have a couple of different examples of what a thesis statement for this specific eulogy will look like. So Elmer Fudd was a sweet and kind man who lived a life full of enjoyment. Mario was an energetic, adventurous, hopeless romantic, forever on a mission to save Princess Peach. Oh, I guess I should mention that you can also do a video game character or something like that. That would be fun. And then another example of a thesis statement is that SpongeBob SquarePants was a kind and lively sponge who brought joy to everyone he met. So, speech components, and I'm going to talk about the introduction briefly. So you're going to include an attention getter. Please ignore the little typo on there. I put together this PowerPoint while I was riding in a car, but you're still going to include an attention getter. So you'll have a character description. You could use a character description. Maybe they have a catchphrase. You could use a psalm, a quote, a music lyric, something like that right at the beginning. Your relatable statement would be acknowledging the important family members, friends, and other characters. So this is going to be slightly different than trying to relate directly to your audience because this is not typically a speech that every single person off the street has heard before. You're going to establish your credibility by describing your personal connection to the character. So again, maybe you are a character, maybe you are the Luigi who is giving the eulogy for Mario, or maybe Mario is one of your cousins. You'll then have a thesis statement, which is going to be that single declarative sentence, and then you will also include a preview, which this one is going to be, could be tough on you because we want to get away from using the signpost words. Instead, you're going to be using pauses in your delivery instead of the traditional signpost words used. This doesn't mean you won't have transitions. It just means that you're going to have to be more creative and just think a little bit, just be a little smarter about how you weave your preview in transitions between your main points. Because when you do listen to somebody give any type of special occasion speech, they typically are not using first, then, finally, in conclusion, and things like that within it. Because going back to what I was talking about earlier, you don't want to sound like you're giving a typical type of speech. You want it to still have that personal connection. You want to, you want to be prepared and be thoughtful and write things out beforehand, but you just don't want it to sound too speechy. So I wanted to provide some examples or an example of a preview, and then there are some outline examples in Cobra to review. That way you kind of get a better understanding of what I'm talking about. So the typical preview, if you were writing an informative speech on Rainbow Brite, would include the words first, then, and finally in that first preview statement. Instead, we take that information, but we just eliminate those signpost words and condense things a little bit. So you see there's not a huge difference. Those are still the main points that are going to be talked about. So we're still going to talk about how Rainbow Brite lifted my spirit. So your spirit as the speaker. And then your main point is going to be sharing an anecdote and some information about Rainbow Brite. Your second main point is establishing that she was a caring and dependable person. And then your third main point is that you are going to be establishing that Rainbow Brite had a mischievous side. The body of your speech is going to, again, not look that different from what you've seen before. For this speech, you're going to want to have 3 to 4 main points, and that should be where you're falling, and you're still going to have subpoints. And what these main points and subpoints are going to be, they're going to have, so you've got your preview, so you know where you're going, and those are each of your main points, but then your subpoints are going to be describing, using anecdotes and telling stories about this person to establish that personal connection. And then you're also going to focus on the lessons that are learned. So if going back to the preview statement, if you wanted to establish that Rainbow Brite had a bit of a mischievous side, you would tell a story about Rainbow Brite's mischievous side, whether you were another character in Rainbow Brite's life or whether maybe Rainbow Brite was one of your siblings. And then what you learned from that story you told. So maybe it's a lesson for the whole audience to take away. Maybe it's a lesson that you personally learned, something like that. And then you're going to have a conclusion, just like you've had. So you're going to restate your thesis statement and summarize your main points. Again, you're going to do those things without using those signpost words. And then so same pattern as before, and then you should still have a memorable close. So for a eulogy, it may be a poem or a lyric, a quote, proverb, something like that to close it all off. That is all I have for this very final lecture that I am giving. I just pretty much reviewed the entire speech and what is to come. But obviously I try to do it as quickly as possible because I know that it's hard to tune in and listen to my voice for a really long time. So if you do have questions about this specific assignment, please feel free to reach out to me via email and ask me any questions. There is more information on Cobra as well as sample outlines that can be found, and those sample outlines came directly from people who have received good grades on this speech. So please check those out, look at those, and use those as your guidelines to move forward. And again, if giving a eulogy is something that is challenging for you because you've experienced loss recently, let me know because I can help work with you to modify. You're still going to identify a cartoon character, but we will go in another direction. Thanks for listening.